there's no one answer to that question, right? Diversification is a concept, right? It's kind of like saying, what's a good workout plan at a gym? Well, it sort of depends what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to run a marathon, if you're trying to enter a weightlifting competition, those would all have, a different combination of exercises that one might do. And if Allie is listening to this, she should just say, I should go to the gym more at all. And that would be a good answer, right?
Hi, Daniel. Welcome to the show.
Ed, good morning.
How's your 2025 started out?
It's been great. We've got 3 kids, so it's a busy and fun time in the Gorovich household. And my wife, who writes cookbooks and novels, had her 3rd novel come out this week. So that's been really exciting for us. And everyone's healthy and happy, and we feel very lucky and grateful to all be here together.
That's great. I don't know how you manage that. 3 kids, head of a company. What's your secret?
I don't think there's any secrets, and I don't know that I'm managing particularly well, but I'm trying.
Are you guys doing any spring trips?
Yeah, well, our family, her family is in Charleston, South Carolina. It's where her parents still live, and we're going to go down there in the spring, and the kids get to see Grandma and Pop, which is really fun. And then we've got a family occasion later in the summer that we're going to go all the way for and celebrate with the family. So.
No, that's fun. Yeah, we're trying to do some traveling. We were looking at Europe, and we were just dumbfounded by the prices. We were looking at Portugal, like $2,000 a ticket for a person. It's crazy right now.
Wow.
I mean, that's kind of the sign of the times, it seems, right now, and crazy things in the market and the economy. Are you hearing stuff like that from your client base, your advisors, helping clients navigate the quickly evolving marketplace with tariffs and regulations, all of that?
Yeah, I think that the thing that we've always found as a financial planning firm, we've always really believed is that, the world is ever changing, right? Perhaps what's new is the speed at which some of that is moving, but we've broadly found that our clients and the clients who we work with, are people who value, having a plan, right? A financial plan, which often goes far broader than the actual, way that we typically conceive of that, right? It's really sort of having a centered understanding of goals, right, and objectives, and what we're here for, what we're trying to do, and all of that. Is powered by the portfolio in many ways, but it goes far, far beyond that. So in many ways, as the world changes and in the last few months, there's certainly been a faster pace of change, if you will. In some ways, it's just become more important just to go back to what are we here for? What are we trying to do? And, are we still on track to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know where things are going to go. It seems like one day tariffs are on, one day they're off. And they're, I guess in this case, being used as a negotiating tool or tactic. And you just almost got to wait and see or just stick to your long-term plan. Are there, do you think, just kind of given the tone in global markets or U.S. markets generally, do you think there are any asset classes or particular strategies which are underappreciated?
In many ways, and this sort of comes back to, it's funny to say this, but I think diversification is underappreciated and the power of diversification. When you have a really high, well-built, properly diversified portfolio of investments that isn't trying to time the markets, that isn't trying to do sort of near-term tactical shifts, it's actually amazing how resilient portfolios are when they're properly diversified, whether it's across asset classes or across public investments and private investments. We've been talking about diversification for so many years and decades as an industry, but I still think it's underappreciated. I can't tell you how many times we have conversations with clients where we show portfolios and we sort of show, what are pretty extreme shocks to the economy, right? The types of stress tests or the types of macro factors that are incorporated into stress tests that the Federal Reserve uses to understand kind of capital sufficiency with banks. And we say, yeah, here's how your portfolio would do if these things were to occur. If we were to see another 2007, 2008, if we were to see another COVID, but it didn't bounce back so quickly, right? Those types of situations, were run as stress tests. Our clients sometimes come away saying, actually, like, I would be fine. So, when you say like what's underappreciated, I actually think that even despite, decades of us all talking about diversification and the math behind it and the academic research, it's still very, very much underappreciated in terms of the power and the resiliency that can provide to individual families.
What is proper diversification in your mind?
Yeah, so there's no one answer to that question, right? Diversification is a concept, right? It's kind of like saying, what's a good workout plan at a gym, right? Well, it sort of depends what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to run a marathon, if you're trying to enter a weightlifting competition, those would all have, a different combination of exercises that one might do. And if Allie is listening to this, she should just say I should go to the gym more at all, and that would be a good answer, right? But I say that because, and I use that analogy because when we talk about diversification, like it actually starts with, well, what are we trying to accomplish? So the way we think about portfolios more broadly is to understand, what's the plan, right? What's the starting point? What's the destination? How are we trying to get there? And the portfolio acts as the engine of the financial plan. All too often we think about it as something off to the side, but it really is part and parcel, and the engine that you're going to put in the car, how you're going to tune that engine, how you're going to gear it, has a lot to do with what is that car built to do, right? But you want to actually be using the full set of tools, right? Balancing them. And the balance that you find between private markets, public markets, between income yielding and growth oriented investments, right? Between geographies, all of those things have a lot to do with what's the goal. In that way, there's really no proper diversification answer. But certainly, if you're not using all the tools in the toolkit, you're probably leaving something on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in the old school asset allocation world, mean variance optimization, Markowitz models. Do you guys approach portfolio construction that way, or is it different today? Are you bringing in AI to some extent and evaluating different ways of constructing portfolios for people?
So at Mercer Advisors, one of the things I love most about our firm, and one of the reasons I'm here fundamentally, is because the one of the core things we believe and that we're trying to do is how do we bring institutional grade investing into individual portfolios. So at Mercer, every family that we work with has a custom-built portfolio, or really a custom-built investing program is really the way to think about it. And that is powered and underpinned by a team of over 100 professional investors. We operate very much like you would see sort of an institutional investor, in the sense that we have voting investment committees that are working on specific topics, right? So there's a subcommittee that focuses on fixed income. There's a subcommittee that focuses on private markets, right? And so on and so forth. And those committees reflect the best thinking of our firm on those areas. And the way that we do that is by anchoring those decisions in academic research and in data. So you mentioned a few moments ago, some of the sort of seminal ideas, right? And then there have been others, since then that have won Nobel Prizes and others, right? That we're bringing in, but we're really looking for academically tested, verified ideas supported by data that we can bring into the portfolios. Now, the way that works, right? The way that that's implemented is through this sort of real-time focus on the markets and what they're doing. So if you kind of think about, back to 2022, which wasn't that long ago, but in a year where fixed income investments behaved in a way that wasn't so favorable, right? And that was true for across everyone who was fixed income, as sort of the inflation cycle changed and the interest cycle changed. Our investment committees were meeting every day and thinking about, like, how do we bring in duration? How do we do that in such a way that it actually is happening rapidly in portfolios, right? So we were in January, February, March, April, rapidly bringing in duration, no different than how the most sophisticated institutional investors were doing that, but we were doing that for families. So when we think about kind of our approach to investing, it's really very much anchored in diversification comments we talked about earlier, but then really taking an academically data-driven approach So you're getting the collective best thinking of all of the investors in the firm applied to your portfolio. My son, I like analogies, as you can probably tell. My son is my 9-year-old son loves Legos, right? And he builds these amazing Legos, these really cool kits now. He was building the Notre Dame out of Legos a few months ago, right? So you can build very, very custom portfolios, right? With these thousands of individual, very sophisticated pieces that, at least when I was a kid, didn't exist in Lego sets, right?
Yeah.
But they're Lego pieces. They're really well hardened. They're really well thought through, right? And that's sort of how we think about how do we bring this institutional investing, sort of academic thinking into my portfolio, your portfolio, or clients' portfolios.
What I like I liked everything you said, but what resonated with me was
Ed, I'm trying to make you a client here. That's the whole goal.
Yeah. Let's talk after. The idea of, so it's based in research and then based in data, and then the team behind it, which I thought was a great point for your firm, having these professionals that are looking at it on a regular basis and providing that extra oversight. That I think that resonates, and that I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah, and what's really neat is many we have 350 advisors serving clients in our team, and many of them are exceptional investors, and they have a real passion and deep knowledge in a specific area of the market. Let's use the fixed income analogy. So actually 2/3 of our voting investment committees are advisors, right? Our client serving advisors who sit on these investment committees and focus on the area that they know best. So it's actually a really neat way of bringing the collective intelligence of everyone to portfolios and helping and allowing sort of all of our people, right? All the people who work in our firm to contribute, their talents, their know-how, their knowledge in the areas that they know best and they're most passionate about as well.
I know you have a bit of a background with technology. That's from your days at BlackRock and the Aladdin system and what have you. But what do you think technology's role is in the future of wealth management here? How much are we going to rely on AI?
I think that, what we're seeing with AI, at least right now, right? It's impossible to tell the future with anything, let alone technology. But we have pretty strong conviction that, at least as it relates to the area of wealth management that we're in, right, that we're going to see sort of technology and AI in particular be huge boosts in terms of the effectiveness of our professionals. So I'll give you a very specific example, right? So at Mercer, we're obviously a financial planning firm, right? We have a financial plan at the core of all of our relationships. And we actually have a team of 70 individuals who work in support of advisors to build financial plans. It's great for advisors, obviously, because it creates a level of support. It's great for clients, right? Because you have people who are building financial plans all day. Think of the sort of hospital analogy, right? There's a group of people who might be doing x-rays all day, and they're sort of really knowledgeable, and radiologists who are reading those x-rays, and they're working with your primary doctor. But what's happening with technology now is if you look at the process of building a financial plan, an average financial plan takes 9 hours end to end to build. A financial plan that's a piece of paper with 200 pages or 60 pages is not really useful. A plan that you can implement is actually useful, right? So we've got to think about the human. There's a step in there which requires you to take all of the documents, take the data from those documents and input them into software. That's maybe 3 hours of the 9 hours. Those 3 hours, we think we can, and we think by the end of the year, we're going to be in a position to do this, actually use AI to read those documents, interrogate those documents, and drop the data from those documents into the financial planning software. What does that mean? That means more time for actually thinking about the insights, right? That means more time for actually figuring out how do we communicate those insights back to the client in a way that they're going to be able to receive, incorporate, and actually do something with. So we think that that's sort of a good analogy for how AI is going to be used more broadly, which is it's going to help us take things, parts of roles and things that we do that are more rote, that are more repeatable, that are more data entry, that are more administrative, have technology help us with that, and then allow all of us, specifically to redeploy the time to the things that are higher value add, that require more creative thinking and judgment. And we're pretty excited about that. We think, our colleagues are going to be the biggest beneficiaries of that transformation over the next number of years.
Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about Mercer Advisors. When did you join, and what attracted you to the company?
No, thanks for the question, Ed. So I grew up around the wealth management industry. My dad actually was in the wealth management industry for a time, and I joined a consulting firm called McKinsey & Company out of undergrad. And I looked around at many industries that I knew nothing about. And, I found myself relatively early on working with wealth management firms because I knew a little bit about it. I actually could spell some of the words. And just had the great privilege of working with colleagues who really, really were deep experts and deeply sort of inspirational folks, many of whom are now in different parts of the wealth management industry, but had a chance to kind of apprentice and learn with them around that, serve clients, ended up leading the wealth management practice alongside an amazing colleague named Jill Zucker for a number of years, and got to see many of the largest firms in wealth management sort of in action. And I found myself sort of drawn to the industry because I found the advisors who I was speaking to, the people who I was getting to meet in some of these projects, doing just these amazingly inspirational work working with families. And then I found these companies almost not focused at all on those families. They're actually focused much more on the internal mechanics of which advisor was going to move from one place to another. And, you go and consult for these firms, and you'd want to go and talk about, the consumer research that we were doing and how do you deliver more value for families. Even then, sort of tax, estate, things we're doing at Mercer now were pretty obviously things families were looking for. And there was no interest. So when I left the firm, I spent some time at Goldman Sachs and at BlackRock in operating roles, and I was leading a technology business at BlackRock. And 3 years ago, I met Dave Welling, who's our CEO and now my business partner. And we spent several hours together. We were introduced by a mutual connection. And he was looking for a president of the firm. And I went home to my wife after that meeting and I said, it's the first meeting. I don't know if the job thing's going to work out. But regardless, I would like to be a client. I would like us to be clients of this firm. Because in that first meeting, it sort of became so apparent to me that I was talking to like a very different kind of firm from any of the ones that I'd seen, big and small, right? And Allie gives the best advice. And she said, well, you should probably take this conversation much more seriously. This is the one firm that you think is different. And that was very, very wise advice and turned into very, very good advice. But the reason that I was attracted to the firm specifically was because it felt like it was solving the actual problem that I was trying to solve, which is we've created in this country a financial system that is at the heart of kind of the dynamism of our economy, but is also very high stakes for families to navigate. And we have a set of rules, right, that are in the economy and a financial system that's very complex, right? It's complex because of the depth of the capital markets. It's complex because of the tax code. It's complex because we have 50 versions of estate law, right? It's complex because we have many, many insurance regulators. And the idea of Mercer was, how do we solve all of this? How do we solve this collectively? How do we solve it in one place? Rick Mercer, who founded the firm, right, the core idea was, you don't need to own a hospital to go to a hospital, right? Like I don't need to own the entire hospital to go to a hospital. If I have something that's really important to me and from a health perspective, I'd like to go to a place where all the experts can collaborate, right? And families have been doing this in the financial realm actually since the late 1800s, right? When the Rockefellers built the first family office, they basically got all of these experts to come and work for them. And they called it a family office because it worked for one family. But that idea doesn't necessarily mean that it only has to work for one family. That was Rick Mercer's idea kind of 40 years ago when he founded the firm. So today, all we do is we build family offices for families that range, from a few $100,000 to hundreds of millions of dollars. Our largest client is actually, north of $1 billion. And these families can, would very much be able to build their own family office if they chose, but they choose not to, right? For lots of reasons that make sense, in the same way that there's probably people who could afford to construct a hospital, but they still choose not to. And if you kind of think about underneath that, kind of to click one level down, what does that actually mean, right? What does it feel like to be a client? There's really four things that I focused on that sort of felt very different to me structurally. One was this idea of having unified in-house teams. So not only do we invest portfolios for clients, and provide financial planning across the board. We actually are executing against that, right? So we are preparing clients' taxes, right? We're filing their returns. We have 100 CPAs inside of Mercer. We're working with them very closely to manage the drafting of their estate documents. We're performing the insurance reviews, and we're finding them the right places to place the insurance if they need better insurance. So that unified in-house team, and to give you a sense, right, we have north of 350 advisors now. We have as many experts as advisors in the firm, right? So if I have school-age kids, listeners may have school-age kids and no school-age kids, like student-teacher ratio really matters. So like that's one, like it's genuinely that. And then the second thing is, and this is probably the thing that was most surprising to me and kind of got me to notice in that first conversation I had described, is for several decades now, Mercer has taken a view that the advisor's role should be to serve their clients, not to go find new ones. And in an industry where we've combined sales and service almost as the default, to say, actually, I want our advisors to be focused day in and day out on delivering for the families where we've made promises, not on finding the next one, is, it's almost like opposite of how you think about this industry, right? And we have a 100-person team of people whose entire role is identifying new clients and matching them to the right advisor. And the reason that's so powerful is not only the obvious one, which is the advisors spend more time with clients, right? And, we have net promoter scores that are in the high 70s, nearing 80 at this point, which for anyone who knows net promoter scores, those are kind of world-class scores. And our average client has been here for 17 years. Like all of those are very obvious. But also what it means is that because when we sort of separated, client development and advice delivery, it means we can match the client or the prospective client to the best advisor for them. And that matching function becomes really important. My sister's a technology executive. She wanted a woman advisor who works with senior technology executives. She knows what level 68, level 69, level 70 at Microsoft is, right? And, we partnered her with an amazing advisor named Jojo Cresci, who is in the Bay Area and works with many sort of technology entrepreneurs and executives and private investors and whatnot. And that sort of ability to match, right? You have firms out there with thousands and tens of thousands of advisors, but the only one you'll ever work with is the first one you meet. And that sort of difference of like actually being able to bring the best team in the firm to you felt very different to me. So this unified in-house team, this sort of experts in-house in the execution, the separation of sales and service, and then the institutional grade investing that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Those three things, were prominent. And then most obviously perhaps is we're a fiduciary firm. So as a legal and regulatory matter, we have to do what's in the best interest of our clients. And we think that's a really important proponent. So those four things, the unified in-house team, the hand-picked advisor whose job isn't to sell, the institutional grade portfolio, and this idea of running a fiduciary firm that has all these capabilities together, like those four things, I was like, oh, this is really different. That sort of long answer to what attracted me here.
Oh, that's really fascinating and seemingly great model. Are you guys still bringing on new advisors or growing in that sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we've been very, we talk a lot about our order of operations, right? And as a partnership, we talk about this a lot, but what's our order of operations? And number one is keeping our promises, right? How do we deliver for the families that have entrusted us with their livelihoods? Number two is, we've seen over the last few years just a real resonance with prospective families and making this available to them. So we added thousands of families each of the last few years, right? We also keep the advisor client ratio very precise, right? So that number, the advisor to client ratio, is kind of floating at kind of a little bit less than 100, right now. So average of 90 something. And that number changes, right? Our ultra high net worth families, that may be a dozen families that someone at that level is working with, and maybe 150 or 170 in a more, where kind of there's a simpler set of needs. All of those numbers are drastically lower than what you see elsewhere. But in order to do that, as you grow the number of clients, you actually have to grow the number of advisors. Otherwise, you keep that ratio. And actually, in certain markets, there have been times in our history where we've stopped taking on new clients if we don't have the advisory capacity to serve them. But we've also been really lucky, and this is sort of that as we've come together, and Mercer is really a partnership of nearly 100 firms that have joined together, but nearly 100 that have joined together because they were doing this work, they believed the things that we talked about, and they wanted to work together instead of all operating, their own smaller firms, right? So in doing that and joining together, we've had a couple of, we'll expect a couple of dozen teams of advisors, groups of advisors around the country to join us together in this journey, to join their life's work with ours, in the course of this year. And bringing on sort of those talented individuals allows us obviously to have impact for their families and other families over time. So we very much expect to continue to grow, but it's really about how to create the context where the best advisors can do their best work. And if you do that, and if you create that kind of home for people, we then have the privilege of serving many, many clients as a result.
What's something that you're most excited about in the coming year for either Mercer or the industry as a whole?
So someone asked me this question of, well, what would happen if everyone, just copied what Mercer did, right? And has been doing. And I will say, first of all, it's really hard because structurally there were a set of choices that were made 30 and 40 years ago that we were really lucky that our founders made at the time that are really hard to copy. The firm was founded by a tax and estate attorney. Rick Mercer was a tax and estate attorney. So you end up having the DNA of the place really kind of connecting in that. But you have people now who are discovering the tax and estate is important, right? Now, I will say it's hard to change the culture of a firm, which is why we think we have a several decade advantage on this. But if someone say, well, what if everybody just copies you over time? It's like, that would be great. The impact that would have on Americans, right? If everyone was getting fiduciary advice that was holistic in nature, that really created a one-stop shop for them, that was delivering institutional investing and where the advisor wasn't outselling to the next client, like that would be tremendous. I think about this very much in the context of, I think we are at the center of many of these trends that we're seeing. We hope to continue to be, but we really, really hope that others copy us because, I think that would just be great for Americans as a whole.
That's awesome. I hadn't thought about that before, but that's really interesting. All right. And then, for our final segment, trend or fad, I'm going to ask about 3 or 5 different topics, get your quick take. Tokenization of real assets, trend or fad?
Slow moving, but a trend.
AI-powered investment strategies, or basically AI is your portfolio manager, trend or fad?
AI as helping portfolio managers is a trend.
Deglobalization and made in America manufacturing resurgence, trend or fad?
Certainly we've been seeing a trend towards made in America for a number of years, and that's seems to be accelerating.
And this is one that I heard about recently: micro retirements, taking a break during one's career to hang out for a year and figure one's life out before going back into the workforce.
I definitely think work-life integration is a trend, right? People not being as on off in this classic idea of go to school, do one job for 40 years, retire. Certainly kind of more creative career tracks, creative career path feels like something that's here to stay and will continue to grow.
Daniel, thank you very much for your time and insights. Loved talking to you and wish we had more time.
No, thank you for a great conversation, Ed.
What's the best way for people to learn more about you, connect with you, or follow Mercer?
MercerAdvisors.com is a great way to learn more about Mercer. And then we're all active on LinkedIn, and folks can find us there.
Awesome. Again, thank you, Daniel, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Trends with Benefits.